Super, thanks, Damien. Right, so thank you for joining us tonight for a talk about English as an additional language. So when we talk EAL, we are saying English as an additional language. Now, this was a hot topic that a lot of you wanted to talk about on a webinar. And so your wishes are command. Here it is. So, but before we start, as usual, apologies for those of you who are here every month religiously. But for those of you who are new to us here at the Stronger Practice Hub, housekeeping rules, phone cameras on or off. I don't mind. It's really okay. But please do keep yourselves on mute at all times unless you're contributing to the Q&A at the end. We don't need to be hearing confidential setting information or anything to do from your house. Any questions, please do type them into the chat box. If you're anything like me, you'll have a question, you'll hold it, you'll try and remember it, and by the end, you'll have forgotten it. So please pop it in the chat box as you think of them, and I will come to them all at the end when we've finished the presentation. Do come and go as you need. It's the evening time. There will be children around, probably pets, cups of tea, something stronger. Please do come and go as you need. And don't worry about making heaps of notes. As I said, this will go up on YouTube so you can watch it again, and slides will be emailed to you when you have completed your feedback form at the end. As you know by now, these webinars are hosted by the Reach Out Early Years Stronger Practice Hub, and we have got Damon and Lisa with us tonight. So thank you to them for joining us, as they always do. Additionally, Victoria and Jess are also the leads on this project as well. Stronger Practice Hubs, as you probably all know by now, were commissioned by the Department for Education to improve outcomes across the early years foundation stage in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic. So there are 18 Stronger Practice Hubs across the UK. This one is based at the Barn Nursery School in Greenster Green. And really, we just offer so much stuff, which I'll come to in a minute. But firstly, the thing that you can all access anytime is the early years evidence store. So this is a super website which has lots and lots of information all about the early years foundation stage curriculum. So all aspects of early years is there, and the latest evidence is there. So if you are new to practice and you're not quite sure or secure on what you're doing yet, have a little look. If you're a more experienced practitioner and you want to just check, am I doing this because it's current evidence, or am I doing it because it's how I've always done it? Go and have a look on there, and that will tell you everything you need to know. The Stronger Practice Hub will also offer bespoke support. So if there's anything that you're struggling with, or anything where you're thinking, I could really do with some help on this, do get in touch with the Stronger Practice Hub team, because they'll be able to put together a package of care for you. We know that childcare isn't a one size fits all. It would be boring if it were. So, if there's something that doesn't quite meet your need from their website or their socials, do get in touch with them. Do follow the Stronger Practice Hub on socials, because actually you're going to get an awful lot of information about what's coming up, childminder networking, webinars on lots of different things. It's not just speech and language webinars. There's all sorts of other webinars going on from other very experienced practitioners. So please do go and check those out, and you'll find everything that you need to know. There's competitions as well. You can win free stuff. Everyone likes winning free stuff. So go and have a look. You might win things. Right, so on to EAL. Now, this is the wordiest slide tonight, so please don't panic on this one. I'll walk you through it. I want you to think about what EAL actually means. So English is an additional language, or EAL is an umbrella term, and it's used to describe children who are acquiring English within the education context. Now, this is a tricky group of children, particularly if you're new to practice. It's not a homogenous group, so it's not a one-size-fits-all group. Okay, so some children, and I've tried to bold the bits that are important for you, some children are newly arrived to England with little or no English. Okay. Some are born in the UK, and so they have varying degrees of English. For some, English is the dominant language. Others are competent bilinguals. So you've got this real mix and match of children who go from having zero English to some English to actually, I don't speak English at home, but I speak it brilliantly in the setting. So you've got this real mix and match of children. Now, the one trap that a lot of people fall into is assuming that children don't have existing knowledge and language skills needed for cognitive development because they don't speak English. Now, what do I mean about that? A lot of people fall in the trap going, this child doesn't speak English, they must have special educational needs. That's not the case. Often can be, but not always. So you must always presume competence. You must always presume that a child has the potential to acquire English until we know that they can't. Okay, until we know that there's a problem. So I like this quote at the bottom. I don't like reading verbatim from slides, but it's worth it for this bit. Young children within the broad development span of 0 to 5 years, and we know 0 to 5 is tricky because there's such a wide range of normal, maybe anywhere along the language development continuum in one or more languages. Some will be beginners in one language but proficient in another. Others will be on varying stages of fluency in one or more languages. The term EAL also recognises that many children learning English in settings are already developing more than one home language and adding English to their repertoire. So what we know now is that we have a complex picture ahead of us. And I'm going to try and help you not to freak out, basically, because it can feel quite a big thing working with children with EAL. So why is this important? So I just like this stat, really. I just thought it was quite interesting. So around 1/5 of children who enter reception have English as an additional language. So that's a huge proportion of children. And this is why, as early years practitioners, you need to be doing as much as you can before they start reception. Okay. Now, I really, really like this slide. So it's just a lot of advice for parents who maybe have that moment of going, what shall I do? Because I see a lot of parents who go, well, should I stop speaking to my child in their home language and concentrate on English then? And this was put together, if you look at the bottom, by lots and lots of different organisations, but the two that matter to me are the Royal College of Speech and Language Therapists and Speech and Language UK. So obviously they are two of our, one is our governing body and one is the lead charity working with children with speech and language issues. So this is a really, really pertinent slide to me. And this is one that's really useful to share with parents. So more than half the world's people speak more than one language, and there's no right way to do it. All families are different. Decide what your family will look like. Okay. How much a baby hears makes a difference. The more you talk in your languages, the more your baby will learn your languages. And that's standard. We know that the more we talk to and interact with children, the better their outcomes with speech and language. When you share language, you share your feelings and your stories. Be proud of your languages, share them as a gift. So this is a really empowering slide that I think is really, really useful to share with families. Talk to your babies in the languages you're most comfortable with. If your child learns one language well from you, it will be easier for them to learn English well too. And this is a lot of the time parents make the mistake of speaking English at home with their child, even though they don't speak fluent English. So what a child is getting as their kind of dominant input is a broken up version of English, which actually doesn't help anybody. I would much rather a child learns the home language fluently, because actually that will then mirror itself back in terms of learning English. So the key is fluent language all the time, whatever that language is. And the last bit, babies' brains are amazing. They can learn any language that they hear, even if they hear more than one language at a time. This document, so I had to do an awful lot of reading around this subject. It's not my specialist area. And I found this document really, really useful. And I really advise that if you want any further information other than the early evidence store, so as well as that, use this because it's a really, really useful PDF that's online on birth to 5 matters. So understanding the steps of learning for children with English as an additional language in the early years. It's a great, great article. So you have two types of children predominantly who present, your EAL children. They may present as silent, so they may just not say anything at all. Or you've got the ones who are trying lots of different things in both languages. They kind of mix and match and they just chuck in some words from their home language, some words from English. And, you know, I think the silent ones are the ones we kind of worry about, aren't they? The silent ones are the ones that have us going, oh, is this EAL or is this something else? Now, again, I found this really useful. So there is a guy called Jim Cummins. Now, I had a look around from this little bit. I had a look into Jim Cummins, and he's just written everything about EAL learning. He's written everything about bilingualism, huge, huge research. He's massive in the field of linguistics. And I found these three little nuggets here gave a real perspective to EAL learning. So when a child is entering a setting where a different language is spoken to their home language, they may take up to 2 months to begin to even understand anything, take 2 years before they can understand a conversation, and take up to 7 years before they can have a full understanding of the new language. And that to me was like, because actually you may not even have a child in your setting for 2 years before they're off to school. And it may take that long for them to understand a conversation, yet we hit the panic button early. And I think this gives us that permission to go, let's just slow down and support the best we can. That's not to say you don't raise concerns if you have them, but I wonder whether sometimes we're expecting things to happen too quickly. So keep that in mind. So, our silent children. So we've got those children who are enthusiastically copying words and phrases, and they don't scare us so much because we can see stuff happening. The silent children, they worry us. And this silent phase can last up to 6 months. But very often, not always, but often these children will produce more complete utterances from the start. It's as if they wait until they're a bit more confident before they get going. But know that a silent child will still be active in their language learning. They won't be speaking, but the cogs will be going. They will be internalizing everything. And they'll also be able to understand more than they say. And this trips back to my previous webinars where I say that receptive language skills come before expressive. It is no different in additional language learning. Your receptive language skills come first. So they may be able to understand a question perfectly well, but they may shake their head because they can't verbalize an answer. It's not because they don't understand the question. And this is where it's difficult sometimes to work out what's going on. Now, there continue to be a lot of long-standing myths surrounding bilingualism, multilingualism. And that's why it's absolutely key that you have some up-to-date evidence with you, because you will probably be asked questions on this, and it's really important. Now, I really like, again, this little handout here. It's a free download. It says on her website that you can use this free download in webinars and the like, as long as you kind of link to her. So her link is down there. And this is a bilingual speech and language therapist. So she's Spanish and English speaking. And she's put together this really, really nice handout. So the myth that exposing infants and toddlers to more than one language may cause delays, that's probably the one I hear the most often is my child's speech and language delay because we speak two languages? No. All children are capable of learning more than one language. And actually, the research shows that children can detect and discriminate differences in sounds between two languages. The next biggest myth is that exposing children who do have a language delay or impairment to two languages will make things even more delayed. But we know that, again, that's not the case. Even children with language impairments or language delays are more than capable of learning one language. So keep it going. This is what I say to my parents. Please do not switch off your home language because there is something else going on. Keep them going and trust the process. Another myth is that bilingual children will have academic problems or difficulty learning at school. No, 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 no. So although there needs to be accommodation for the fact that they have a different home language, the research actually shows that there's an academic advantage of being bilingual. So they have better problem solving skills. These children are better at multitasking, and they have increased cognitive flexibility because they've been flexing and moving between two languages since they were little. The other myth is that when children mix their languages, they're confused. This is absolutely not true. It's a process called code mixing. And this is actually showing that a child is becoming, more efficient at using both languages, and they have a good understanding of the rules. So all of these myths can be countered by the current research, and it's important that you're up to date with this. I think it's really important, though, to nod to the child's home language where you can. So these are the reasons for keeping both languages going. So it's important for family relationships. For at the very, very, very root of everything is if parents communicate to their child in their home language, we want to keep that going because it's important for strong relationships. A strong foundation in their first language facilitates a strong language acquisition in the second. Bilingualism doesn't cause language impairment. So why are you going to take a language away? A child's dominant language can shift over time. So actually you should keep both of them going. Some of these are a bit speech therapy focused, so we don't need to talk about the goal of therapy. Again, it nods to academic and cognitive advantages. And also, if you shift from using two languages to only one, code mixing will stop, which we've just talked about. And actually, that's a natural bilingual behavior. So why would you do that? So again, these are all things that you can just have stored in a folder somewhere for that moment where you have a bilingual family coming in and they start to question, what should we do? All right, so that's a bit of the theory. But what about, supporting these learners in your setting? Where do we start? And I thought, well, I'm not an early years practitioner. I'm a speech and language therapist. How am I going to do this? So I actually looked up the 4 principles of the early years foundation stage and educated myself in that because I didn't know there were 4 principles of the early years foundation stage. And now I do. So I tried to think about what could we do in relation to EAL, in relation to these. So thinking about every child being unique, who's constantly learning, who can be resilient, capable, confident, and self-assured. Use your parents. They are invaluable. Find out their child's interests. Find out favourite songs and books. Now, Google Translate has absolutely transformed how we can communicate with parents who don't speak English. I can now find out virtually anything I want. When I first qualified 20 years ago, that wasn't an option. It is now, and it's wonderful. So please don't be afraid to use Google Translate. I promise you, these parents will be very grateful that you have. Incorporate the things that you find out from the parents into your setting. Absorb favourite books from the home language into your book corner. All of your books do not have to be in English. They can be in other languages too. Seeing a variety of print is a bonus. Children can make inferences from pictures. So there is absolutely no disadvantage to having books from varying languages. It can only be beneficial. Listen to favourite songs from the child's home language as well. Ask the parents to teach you some key words from the home language. So we call them survival words. So those words that really carry weight for a child's basic needs. If they can phonetically teach you 5 to 10 survival words that you can start to use in your setting with an with an EAL learner, then your quid's in. Positive relationships. Now I think we tend to think positive relationships with children, other children and peers, but it needs to be with adults too. So think about how you're going to interact with that child using visuals and all the other tips I'm going to talk about in a minute. Consider a buddy system. So that's either with a child with the same home language or a capable English speaker. Not a chatterbox who's going to take over, but a capable English speaker who can take a child under their wing, who will enjoy perhaps nurturing another child, who one of our sort of natural teacher children. You'll know them because they're the ones who automatically kind of mother hen the other children. If you've got a child like that in your setting who can nurture one of our EAL learners, all the better. Enabling environments. Now this is where it really comes into its own. So children learn and develop well in enabling environments with teaching and support from adults who respond to individual interests and need and help them to build their learning over time. So we're thinking visuals, aren't we? We're thinking visual timetables so that children know exactly what's coming. We're thinking of props for books. So, those book bags with toys and props. I think a nod to emotions as well. So very clear emotion access for children so they can point at a picture if they're feeling poorly, if they're feeling good as well. I think that's really powerful for a child to be able to advocate how they are feeling. The visual timetable, we've talked again, if children feel secure in their setting, they're more likely to learn. And a visual timetable gives that child that security that they know what's happening. So again, you're maximizing their chances to learn. For you can have phonetically spelt labels around the setting in the child's home language. So why not write a few things down in their home language in a way you've written so that you'll know how to pronounce them? So that you can perhaps reach out to that child in their home language in very basic terms, and use lots of photos as well. Also think about their culture. Are there any cultural items that you can incorporate into their settings? Are there any celebrations coming up that you can observe from your child's culture as well? So do always think about that also. Learning and development. Okay, so we need to recognize the importance of that, and we need to acknowledge that they learn and develop at different rates. So keep the child involved. Find ways to keep the child engaged. Always presume understanding. As I've said before, make sure that you are assuming that the child is understanding what you say. So keep a track on their developmental home language. Make sure there's no concerns regarding a language delay in their home language. If the parents are concerned about the home language delay, then you may need a speech and language referral. Two-way communication is really useful. So videos are great for this if you can share both ways. If you've got a mechanism where they can share something that they've been doing at home and you can share things that you've been doing at your setting, so that actually parents can see it. Develop early vocabulary and encourage and respect communication in the home language. The importance of listening. Okay, so again, I think this is very often missed, but listening is really key. It's at the heart of any language learning. Children need the opportunity to listen to English in order to learn it. But the advantages of this as well is it also take listening tasks or listening activities, take a child out of the spotlight. It's more non-confrontational. So a confrontational task is where you want a child to do a thing. A non-confrontational task is where they can sort of sit back and absorb it. and the pressure. We everyone prefers a much more non-confrontational approach. Nobody likes a sort of right, do this approach. We probably all didn't like it at school or university, and we don't like it now, so nor do our children. So how can we maximize a child's opportunity to listen to English if they're an EAL learner? Preferential seating, so sat at the front with a direct eye line to you. Keep vocabulary consistent. So always use the same phrase. So tidy up time or garden time. Don't vary between it's time to go out to the garden, let's go outside, shall we go outside, shall we go and play out there. Just keep it garden time all the time. And then that child will very quickly associate the sound garden time with the activity. Have quiet but not silent time where children can listen a lot to spoken language. Have a lot of non-linguistic listening games. So maybe matching animal sounds to animals, maybe copying rhythms, musical instrument-based games. Learning to listen is wider than just learning to listen to language. All sorts of listening activities are useful. And as I said before, support spoken language with visuals. And as with so many of the things that we talk about in these webinars, these strategies benefit all children. All of these things will benefit all of your little learners. So they're well worth thinking about. Now, this is one that I came across on the gov.uk website. So say less and stress, go slow and show. And actually, it's quite a good little mantra. But what does it mean? Let's break it down. So say less, short, simple sentences, but don't forget your proper grammar. Lots of people shorten their sentences, but then actually drop the grammar. Make sure the grammar is complete, but keep things short and simple. Stress. By stress, they mean emphasizing important words with your voice and also perhaps using visuals with them at the same time. Go slow is quite self-explanatory. Speak slowly, add pauses, give time to process. And show. So use visuals. Now they can be, we've talked about kind of augmentative communication. So adding things to our spoken language. They can be signs or iconic gestures. So, drink, food. Use pictures, objects, photos, but anything where you're giving a visual to support what you're saying. Communication is key when supporting a child with EAL. But I often think we think that's just for the child, but it's not. Actually, we need to improve communication between parents and staff, parents and other parents. Now, I think often parents who don't speak English can sometimes feel a bit out on a limb. It's really important to bring them into that community of parents in your setting. Parents and child and other children, and also child and staff. So there's a whole kind of group around the child and around your setting who need to be communicating well. So if you have an EAL learner or EAL learners, it's well worth sitting down and thinking, right, how are we communicating in this web? Are we communicating effectively with everybody? Or is there a facet that I can improve a little bit more? Where can you find more information? Because obviously we only have a limited amount of time. So I had a little trawl around and found some very useful things. Now, can't remember what it stands for, but this was a fantastic website. So it's basically all about EAL learners. And although this is a very boring screen grab, there was a lot of stuff on it. So please do have a look. The blog articles are particularly good because they're very, very quick and very, very easy reads. The Bell Foundation is also brilliant. So they work a lot, obviously, with EAL learners. So there's a huge resource library on this website. And I would say that was probably my absolute favourite. There was so much information on there. Now, this was another good one as well. So the Northern Association of Support Services for Equality and Achievement. Now, this was really, really good. And I actually really, really liked their shop because I found this. So it's an early years foundation EAL assessment framework. So basically, it's a framework for assessing children with EAL. So you can be looking at and tracking both their development in English and looking at their home language as well. So I think that it's £10. So obviously you still have to buy it. It's not a freebie, but I looked at that and thought that looks to me, if I was an early years practitioner, that looks very useful. BBC have done it again, haven't they? Their Tiny Happy People website has such a good section on bilingual babies and multilingual babies. Obviously, this is good speech therapist advice on raising a bilingual child. Nice to read that and see that she said the same thing as me. Always very reassuring. And lots of articles for parents, but also lots of research here on things like why speaking different languages at home is good for your child. So go and check them out as well. Now, EAL or speech and language delay. Now, this is the one, and I was talking to Damon before we came on this evening, and my first post was working with children in East London who were virtually all EAL learners who also were deaf. So trying to work out whether we had EAL or hearing or speech and language delay was always a really interesting thing to tease apart. It's very, very difficult to know. If you feel confused, don't panic. Okay. There are qualified speech and language therapists out there who go, this is a tricky one. So don't panic. If there is a speech, language, and communication need, though, it will be present in both languages. So communication with parents is really, really, really important. Are they concerned in their home language? How does the child make their needs known at home? What communication profile do they have at home? Think about cultural considerations as well. So, for example, in the Japanese and Chinese culture, reduced eye contact is actually a sign of respect. So we would mark it as a marker of social communication difficulties. So you need to be very sensitive when you're jotting your observations down, that you then track back to the origin culture and see whether there's anything that could be influencing it there. There may not be, but it's important to kind of look very holistically at the child's development and really think about the culture from which they are coming. If you're worried, always speak to parents and always refer to a speech and language therapist. So we will be able to assess a child's English, and we will also be able to assess their home language with trained interpreters. And that is something that we are trained to do. So we can still assess a child's home language even though we're not native speakers. So you must, if you have a conversation with the parents and you kind of come to the conclusion that you think there's a delay in both languages, don't be afraid to refer on to speech and language therapy. We will be able to help. All right, so that's your whistle stop tour into English as an additional language. Next month, it's a big one. We're doing autism spectrum disorder. So this is kind of a hot topic, and if it's as popular as the ADHD webinar was, then we're in for a fine time. So that's on the 5th of March, and then the repeat is on the 11th of March. So do please join us for that one. We'd be delighted to have you along for it. So that, as usual, is the teaching portion complete. So